in the context of a democracy, all of us must become more familiar with how the budget process works. We can only deal with what we finally get as appropriation by the elected representatives of us, the people. Now, when that budget is passed, it is not cash. It is an approval to spend a certain agreed sum on identified areas. And I think this is important for members of the public. So when you hear that, oh, a budget has been approved for a ministry or a department, it isn't cash. Now, we are seeing that since May, when the budget was passed, about 300 billion has been paid out by way of releases. That has to be so because the money is then gathered from sale of crude oil, from taxes that come in, and from all other proceeds from where government earns money. And then the hard choices begin. Who goes first? Now, out of that 300 billion plus or minus, my ministries, 3 ministries, have received 102 billion, to be specific. Now, it has been described as a lion's share of 300 billion, but it is a lion's share against our realities. Our realities are that we inherited 206 roads under construction, and the liabilities for those roads were in the sum of 2.1 trillion naira, out of which government had paid about 600 or 700 billion naira. So the story that we met were contractors, whether in works, power particularly, and works, saying that over the last 2 to 3 years, they haven't been paid. So that was when the seeds of this recession were sown. Money increasingly leaving the economy, leaving the hands of people who work on a day-to-day basis. The result was that workers were being laid off gradually, progressively, and systematically. Our way out of it is a fiscal spending, an increased budgetary size. Ambitious because we go from an average of 4 trillion, which was the average budget size in this country for almost half a decade, when we were earning $100 per barrel of oil a day. We were budgeting averagely 4 trillion. We're going now from there to a budget of 6 trillion when we are earning less than that, significantly less than that. It's ambitious. Now, but what has also changed? And for those who say they haven't seen change, let me dimension that also. What has changed is that from spending 10 to 15% of our budget on capital and spending 85 to 90% on recurrent, this government has committed to now spending 30% of 6 trillion on capital and 70% on recurrent.
We were forced to devalue, deregulate. We were forced to open our doors, roofs, and so on to importation. We began devaluing the naira. It was 3 naira to $1 in 1986 April. I was away in Hong Kong when I phoned home, and I heard it, and I said, this is the beginning of Nigeria's journey to disaster. We've done it steadily for 30 years. We are now at $400, and we're told to continue devaluing, that devaluation will bring wonders. I don't believe it, but there are those who insist it's the only way out. We'll see how far it goes. I hope we don't hit 1,000 naira someday. Because the demand for dollars is 2.5 billion a week. And I have this from high authorities within the system. Every week, Nigerians are looking for $2.5 billion to import things. We don't have it. We don't print dollars. And people are angry that we're not making it available. But why aren't we producing? Fiscal problems, economic difficulties we faced, which India and Malaysia rejected in the early days of the suggestion that we should do structural adjustment. So we became importers of rice, $5 million a day, wheat, $6 million a day, tomato paste, $400 million a year. It goes on and on and on. $20 billion a year on food. Why can't we produce? A number of things. First, elite indifference to agriculture. We abandoned it to the poor peasants in the villages, whose average age today is about 65 The youths have left the villages. They moved into the cities. There are no jobs in the cities, so urban poverty has become more dangerous than rural poverty. Interest rates have remained impossible for farmers to access. The quality of seed is hopelessly poor, and one of the worst is our lack of knowledge of fertilizer application. We'll soon publish in a booklet for every Nigerian in agri to have the kind of fertilizer suitable for what crop in what state of the Federation. The study is ready. We distributed these to state governors in February. The governors of the Northwest applied this new formula so well that 2 weeks ago, the governor of Jigawa, at a meeting we had, announced that his farmers are yielding 7.5 tons of rice per hectare, up from 2.5. That's almost the world average. The same thing is happening in Kebbi, and the same thing is happening in Anambra and Enugu. We have a problem with fertilizer distribution, however. At the beginning of this season, we started moving fertilizer up. Then the security agencies told us that we had a problem with Boko Haram converting urea by a mixture of some other ammonium nitrate and so on to make bombs. So we stopped moving fertilizer for nearly 2.5 months. So the price of fertilizer went up, in some places to 10,000 naira per bag of urea. We are dealing with that now, and we hope to bring it to an end shortly.
The diversification agenda is not a rhetoric. The diversification agenda is an economic objective that we will achieve with what we're doing with the budget, with our implementation, and with how we are managing our finances. So yes, we are borrowing. We need to borrow because we cannot wait for the oil price to recover. We have to borrow to invest in these large infrastructure projects that are needed to unlock the competitiveness in our economy and create jobs for our people. That's the objective of this government, and that's what we're working towards. I'm also extremely confident that we will get there. The one thing Nigerians have in abundance, it's probably our greatest intangible asset, is the spirit of the Nigerian people, the entrepreneurship of the Nigerian people, and their hard work. If we can combine those with an enabling environment created by government, I believe this economy can turn around. I know people are concerned about recession. Recession is a word. We can come out of a recession. We can make sure it is as short as possible by sticking to the prescription, which is we must be disciplined in our expenditure, we must invest in our capital, and we must diversify our economy. The economy had been heading in this direction consistently for the last 7 to 8 years. Our GDP growth, whilst robust in nominal terms, was masking some very serious vulnerabilities. That is, it was a GDP growth that was not inclusive. And it was a GDP growth that basically consisted of a very high oil price, increasing debt levels. Indeed, we have all the debt that was forgiven in 2005, and the debt forgiveness had been gradually built up again in what is largely an unproductive economy. Only 10% of what we had been spending was going on capital. It is capital that grows an economy. No economy has ever grown or developed doing what we had been doing, which is spending 90%, 90 naira of every 100 on recurrent and only 10% on capital. That capital, that's the fiscal lever that allows economies to truly grow. And if not addressed, we will only mask the problem, but the problem will eventually vest. And that is really what we came in to inherit. So what did we decide to do? We had to attack the problem of recurrent expenditure. Currently, when we came in, 165 billion naira every month went on salaries. As we speak now, we've reduced it to 159. If you spend 165 billion every month on salaries, there is very little left for capital. And that has been our problem. The problem of our exchange rate is that 70%, we have a marginal propensity to import of 70%. In other words, 70% of what we spend is on imported products. We are not productive. We don't produce anything. It is cheaper to bring in tomato paste from China than to move tomato paste from Kano to Lagos. We have to correct that. The infrastructure is the problem. If rail was working, we could compete. If our road network was properly funded, we could compete. If power was there so that we had storage, we can compete. So those structural adjustments are fundamental They're not quick. There is no quick solution to our problems. There's a fundamental change that is needed that will require patience, but we are moving in the right direction, and if we can be patient, we'll certainly get there. If we can be patient and be disciplined, we can get there. We have all the resources, all the potential. What we need is the policies and the implementation of those policies that will unlock it, and that's what this government is doing.